First of all, thanks to Johnny for inviting me. I think I'm kind of the comedy turn for this afternoon, so bear with me. Just to give you a quick background on me, I was a social media consultant for the BBC. I was a social media manager, and for 2.5 years I existed in a world of memes and virality and teaching actually the communications department of the BBC to use social media. For 2.5 years of my entire life, I was a massive advocate of social media. And I've spent the last 1.5 years as a consultant and as a writer trying to work out what the hell I was doing that whole time. And essentially, it's not really got any clearer, as you'll find out as I go through this presentation. But what I'm really interested in is the whole idea of social media and photography, which seems relevant to this afternoon. Basically, what I originally came from was an art history background. So my tendency is always to look back and look at the great works on these particular things and see how much people actually could tell us from the past about what we're doing in the present and what we might do in the future. And the one I always go back to is, bear with me, it's Walter Benjamin. So it's like, it's old hat, but it's my hat, so I'm going to use it. So basically, let's, how are we doing? There we go. So that's me, Chris Jones. And first of all, I concentrate on Instagram in my title, but bear with me, because what we're really looking at here isn't just Instagram, it's all social media photo sharing apps. So you're probably, all of you in this room, using one or more than one at a particular time. And just to run you through several of the ones that we're currently all inundated with. Flickr's a big one. I'll get onto Flickr in a little while. And you get the general idea. There's over 5,000 photography sharing apps currently on the Apple Store. And picking and choosing between them, a lot of the times, at their heart, they have the ability to share, they have the ability to use your smartphone to take pictures of whatever it is you're looking at a particular time, and most importantly, they also involve software which involves you being able to render them, to filter them, to change them in some aspect, to make them look slightly different or look like something else. And this is something that I'm really, really fascinated by, and which is something I'll get onto. But basically, it's the ubiquity of it as well, which fascinates me. And I mean, we're all aware of this, but how does this rub up against what we would consider art? And that's where the democracy versus the elitist is where the interesting stuff's happening at the moment, I think. So to look at Instagram's current, according to their own publicity website, statistics, 100 million monthly active users, 40 million photos a day, 8,500 likes a second, and 1,000 comments a second. So there's a huge, supposedly, conversation going on around photography at the moment, or what people would consider to be photography at this particular point. But what does it really tell us, and where exactly are we going with this? So the first issue is the whole point of professionalism. And there's an awful lot of photographers in this room, I know, and some really amazing photographers in this room, and really amazing artists. And now this statement was issued by Yahoo's CEO, Marissa Mayer, last week. I don't know if many of you keep up with this kind of stuff, but Yahoo, who own Flickr, actually changed their business model last week. They changed their website rather atrociously and were inundated by complaints, but more importantly, they changed their model, which was they got rid of what they called their pro account, and they actually turned it into an ad-based revenue model. So they scrubbed out what you got with your pro account, if you're not used to using Flickr, was extra storage space. And they actually removed that. And for a huge fee of something like $500, you can get 2 terabytes now of storage space. But they work on the basis that you only now, 2 terabytes, 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 2 t it's all free, but you get the adverts with it. So in the same way that Facebook changed its model, so now your timeline is just stuff full of adverts every 5 minutes, Yahoo are going the same way. And the CEO issued this comment at a press conference and immediately retracted it because, of course, the world was up in arms over this. There's no such thing really as professional photographers. Great, fantastic. So that's the end of photography, so we might as well just leave now. But essentially, this whole idea of professionalism, using instant photography and using social media as a medium for sharing photography, the notion of professionalism is really, really problematic. And yet again, it's something that fascinates me endlessly, because on Instagram, as a site, you will find lots of what people would consider professional photographers. There's a few examples here of people who have vast amounts of followers, and you get the general idea of the kind of stuff that they're putting out there. Some of it good, some of it awful, some of it kitsch. But what's the point of it? This is what we're really coming up against here. So one of the things that Instagram and most of these apps do, and you'll probably realize this when you see these pictures loaded up on Facebook, etc., is the whole idea of the image as somehow degraded, somehow made nostalgic, somehow made into something that represents a past, something golden, something wonderful, something that doesn't actually exist. And some of this is quite extraordinary when you actually think about it for more than 5 minutes. Now, here's a Polaroid, or is it a Polaroid? Actually, I've played a bit of a trick here, because this is a Polaroid. This was taken in the 1970s, and it's actually one of Tarkovsky's Polaroids of his dog, which is probably why it's so beautiful. But this is the kind of thing that people are approximating at the moment. This is the kind of thing that they're actually trying to establish, and it's usually through the use of filters. And you'll actually find this is just an example of a message board I was looking through when I was researching this talk, and it's like people saying, why do things look better on Instagram? And the simple answer was the filters. Things look better on Instagram because you instantly put them through a filter. Without any, second thought about it, you've suddenly got a picture that looks brilliant, looks wonderful, supposedly, according to a set of predetermined rules, which we seem to have bought into in a very reactionary fashion. And what I'm concerned with here is the idea that we have moved into this sphere whereby images have to conform to a very, very specific set of rules. And actually, we'll get onto this, I'll mention this, but this notion of creativity around this notion of instant creativity, the whole creativity in inverted commas, has become really problematic because of the fact that it's a set of very reactionary rules. And what we've done is we've democratized something, and by democratizing an art form or the tools of an art form, we've actually created something massively reactionary. And yet again, to go back to Walter Benjamin, in 1935, Benjamin would have said that essentially what he was looking at in 1935 obviously was the rise of fascism. When I woke up this morning and listened to Radio 4, I thought I'd kind of woken up in Europe in 1935. It sounded a bit like that. But essentially, this whole idea of filtering and enhancing. So here's a dictionary definition of a filter. A porous device for removing impurities, or as a verb, to remove unwanted material. So what are we doing here with social sharing of photographs? What we're doing is we're actually removing stuff and enhancing stuff at the same time. So we're upping the contrast, we're lowering the detail, etc., etc. We're putting a little border around it to create a different framing for it. All of these particular processes work within very specific parameters that have been very, very carefully tailor-made to dial in to our notions of nostalgia. So this is from a recent essay which was published in the New York Times. As you can see, this pretty well sums up the way I feel about it. Romantic, somewhat infantile, childish nostalgic about sunny days, buzzy bees, reading books on a porch and being also oh so gently alienated. And this is the whole idea of instant alienation, instant nostalgia. And what's really extraordinary about this is when you consider the key demographic for people using these tools at the moment, they're people who probably don't actually remember Polaroids or this kind of stuff. This, I don't know if anybody recognizes one of these. I used to have one of these when I was about 10. This is the Instamatic, the Kodak Instamatic. It came out in hundreds of different models, but it was essentially the cheapest and easiest way to take a photograph when you were a kid. Came with little cartridges that you shoved in the back. And essentially, I think they probably cost about $5 or something like that. And of course, the name Instagram comes from the Instamatic. It's this whole idea of the fact that we're taking something from an imagined past and bringing it into the future. But the point is that, as I say, a lot of the people who use this stuff don't actually remember this stuff in the first place. So it's a constructed nostalgia. So creativity. So even in 35, Walter Benjamin considered creativity, along with the concepts of genius, eternal value, mystery, to be outmoded and bourgeois. In fact, he equated creativity with fascism. And I think he was kind of onto something at this point. It's not surprising since he was living in Europe in 1935, but photography allows us to capture, this word capture, we keep coming back to this whole idea of capturing these moments, these hidden moments, these being able to see things that weren't there in the first place. And what we're constantly doing is inventing. And in fact, it has more notions to do with politics and to do with the political idea of the self than it has to do with anything else. So, yet again, another quote. From a practical standpoint, digital art tools are incredibly versatile, forgiving of mistakes, with the ability to create with almost any canvas size you like, multiple layers, colour, light enhancements, even make and customise your own brushes. There's very little limit to your creativity. Now, that came from a site of one of these sharing apps. I can't even remember which one, but all of them. If you look at any of these sites, they always mention creativity. It's all, you know, what a wonderful world. Go out and make your own world. Go out and create your own world, all this kind of thing. It's the cult of the individual. It's the cult of the special. It's the cult of art, which is basically something which, as a democratizing tool, we'd think that we'd probably, you know, be ridding ourselves of. So Benjamin then came along and said, for the first time, this was back in 1935, for the first time captions have become obligatory. He was talking here about the reproduction of art. This is from the age, art in the age of mechanical reproduction. And of course, what he was talking about here was the reproduction of images in magazines, in newspapers, etc., and also the cinema. So for the first time, captions have become obligatory, and it's clear that they have an altogether different character to the title of the painting. So one of the next things that we do with filters is we filter with captions. And if you think about what's happening on social media right over there in terms of hashtags. So basically, what is a hashtag? It's something that labels something. It's something that changes the actual way in which we define and the way in which we look at those pictures. So, you know, it all makes sense. Walter was kind of ahead of his time, I think, in this way. There's another famous interview with Brian Eno in about 1981, where he talked about the fact that in the future, in the very short future, people would be designing software to make music sound old. And essentially, he could have been talking across the whole spectrum of things. This idea of, not the end of history, but this idea of the fact that for some reason, we seem to be creating more and more means to actually put a filter between ourselves and our real life experience. Another part of my background, just to sort of give you the background of me, is that I do a lot of meditation. And a lot of meditation teaches you about mindfulness, all about being in the moment, etc., etc. So this stuff has worried me for quite a long time, and I can't quite get to grips with it. I love the tools, but I really hate the effect. And as Joe pointed out earlier on, you know, you go to a gallery, what are people doing? They're taking pictures of pictures constantly. And this annoys me so much. And I can't work out why it annoys me so much in a lot of ways, apart from the fact that they're not actually looking at the pictures themselves. They're not enjoying the experience, as Joe said. And I think that's a really, really key point. So Benjamin famously came up with this idea of the aura, the authenticity of an image, the idea of reality, and we've already had much bigger brains today talking about this stuff. And I think that that's a massively important thing here, because what we're doing is we're presenting a reality that's manipulated. We're not actually giving ourselves reality, we're giving ourselves an identity, an avatar. Social media is all about creating an identity. You're probably all aware of this. I mean, if you look at my tweets as they come up, there's a picture of me with Tamsin Gregg on my avatar. It's like, she's not really my girlfriend. I've just kind of, you know, I was drunk, I took a picture, it was fine. I put it up there for a laugh, but the point about the fact is, you know, even I'm constructing a reality around myself. So the aura of authenticity becomes really, really twisted when you talk about photography and social media. Here we are. Here's a picture of the gallery. People taking pictures of Demoiselle d'Avignon. So again, the whole idea of sharing. So the act of snapping a picture is no longer enough to confirm reality and enhance experience. Only sharing gives us that validation. Why do we need that validation? What's the validation all about? The validation is, yet again, to do with this construct of the cult of the self, the cult of the perfect life, the cult of the reactionary. The idea that perhaps we are just prolonging something that in 1935 was already an outmoded concept. But for now, the democratization of photography has sent us spinning back into this age. And I think there's no coincidence whatsoever that we find ourselves in a rather dodgy political state at the moment in terms of the way in which we view the world and view our fellow human beings. And I think this has got a lot to do with it. So, good quote from Diane Arbus, which was this whole idea of sharing. And she'd worked out in 1977 that our whole guise is like, actually I think this was 72 she said this, our whole guise is like giving a sign to the world to think of us in a certain way, but there's a point between what you want people to know about you and what you can't help people knowing about you. Social media for the first time has allowed us to actually leap over that and actually edit our own view of the world and people's view of us and the world that we live in. Susan Sontag in 77 said, needing to have the reality confirmed and the experience enhanced by photographs is an aesthetic consumerism to which everyone is now addicted. And that was in 1977. Imagine how much more that's true now. It's just painfully rammed home again and again and again. And here's a really good example of it. So this is the kind of thing you get now. This is a blog called Rich Kids on Instagram. Don't know if anyone's ever seen it. It's just hundreds of pictures of rich kids Instagramming themselves on their parents' jets and yachts with their Louis Vuitton bags and their expensive jewelry. So, to move forward a bit more, there's this whole idea of validating the moment which we have here, which I find really, really fascinating. This is a meme which I just got from Facebook, but there's a rather dark truth behind it, that people need to validate this stuff by recording it, to constantly put themselves through this process of keeping these images and then sharing these images. And you talk about sharing, people talk about conversations online in terms of sharing. The point of the matter is, you know, I've been a member of Flickr since 2005, And I think, apart from people saying, what a great picture, every once in a while, or ticking the favourite box or whatever it is, no one has ever had a conversation with me about my photographs. No one's ever come to me and said, you know, that's great, but you could have upped this, or, you know, you could have cropped it slightly differently, or you could have, you know, what the fuck are you doing? That subject matter's horrible, or anything. I would really welcome that stuff. But no one really has a conversation around this stuff. All they do is they just approve each other, you know. So, as someone, I was talking to someone about this earlier, this is famously, there are restaurants now who are actually banning people from Instagramming their food because they're actually, for various reasons. So is it okay to photograph your food? I would say no, but you know, if you want to, fair enough, but then do we really need to see it? Though, at the bottom of this article was the best response I've ever seen, which was this. Which is great. I think, but the point about this is that we've created it's an almost religious and, as I say, incredibly reactionary way that we respond to these things. We think we're buying into the idea of creativity. We're buying into the idea of every individual as an artist with something interesting to say. And the trouble is, what we're really doing is we're creating what Buddhists would term a cocoon. We're putting something between us and our reality. And this whole idea of art and what the function of art is being gradually eroded bit by all of this stuff. And as I say, I mean, I came today and I've laboured over this for about 2 weeks. It's like trying to answer the question for myself. And as you can probably tell, I haven't really come up with, you know, sort of a definitive argument about it. But what I've come up with is the idea that the tools are great, but for some reason we have to calm down. And we also have to work out a way of actually putting this stuff into our lives where it doesn't intrude into reality. So there's a few conclusions there. But essentially, that's me done. Thanks.